Welcome to The Ripple Within, a podcast by All-in-One Life Coaching. I'm Michelle, a certified life coach specializing in mindset, emotional wellness, and the law of attraction. I work with people to help create the narrative around their desired outcome.
And I'm Kathy. I'm here to ask the questions, explore the patterns, and share the real life moments that make this all, make sense.
This podcast is about the connection between how we feel and the physical reality we experience every day. We'll explore how our thoughts lead to outcomes and how narrative shifts can create big change.
We'll keep it grounded using logic and lived experience, not just theory. And if you've ever wondered why you feel stuck, reactive, or out of sync with yourself, you're not alone.
Our life experience will always match how we feel. This podcast is about exploring our ripple within, how our thoughts, emotions, beliefs, and values contribute to the physical life we live. Let's get into it. Welcome back, everyone. We have another special guest joining us today. Today we have Troy. Kathy, what have you got for us?
Welcome, Troy. So good to see you and so good to have you. Just a little bit about Troy. He is with Main Sequence Consulting. They are a business strategy and sales acceleration firm based in Canada that helps technology and business-to-business companies drive revenue growth and improve go-to-market performance. They work with venture capital and private equity portfolio companies to strengthen sale processes, shorten customer acquisition cycles, and optimize teams using decades of international sale experience and modern cloud-based technology. Main Sequence blends real-world sales know-how, strategy, process design, and lead generations to help clients with complex technology deals globally and improve profitability even in challenging economic conditions. Holy crap, Troy. Maybe in English. What do you do, bud?
Well, thanks very much, Kathy. Essentially that, but yeah, that definitely was a mouthful, wasn't it? So, so at the end of the day, I work with startups, primarily in the tech space, and at various phases in their development to help them grow, essentially, right? I mean, I work with guys that are very, very intellectual, very smart. They've got some great technology out there, great engineers. With the challenge, though, of how do you actually commercialize this technology and get it to market, right? We're not experts in everything, right? I mean, I'm not a super expert guru in any one particular, discipline. And these guys are not, skilled in sales and business development and marketing strategy and technology commercialization. So there's a natural synergy there, and that's the gap that we fill. So uh, essentially, that's the long and the short of it. When it comes to working with these guys, right? It's not easy getting things to market, right? I mean, I typically leverage my own network that I built over the past 20 25 years right now, right, to help these guys get introduced to the right people, in the right industries and the right locations, to start getting things going, right, from a sales and business development perspective, and make the intros, start creating some momentum, and eventually, getting their technology into a plant or a manufacturing facility or in an enterprise environment, right?
So, Troy, what is it that brings you to our little corner of the world in law of attraction?
Well, when Michelle propositioned me to come and have a chat on the podcast, and mentioned about the law of attraction and what my thoughts were on it, I thought it'd be a good venue to voice sort of where I stand and how I see things. I think the law of attraction to most people is sort of it almost feels like it's almost like a spiritual type of thing, where I look at it more at the scientific level. I'm a pretty logical type of guy myself. So, uh, if when it comes to looking at things, spirituality, for example, I always like to understand the science behind these things, right? Because I think when it comes to spirituality, I think it's spirituality if you don't understand the underlying science behind it,
Yeah.
right? And I've always been somebody that's been curious. I like to read a lot. I've always have, and I like to really understand what's going on here. And I've over the years, I like to read a lot about biology and psychology and behavior and body language and things like this. It just interests me. And when it comes to stuff like the law of attraction, I start looking at, why is it the case that this is how it is, right? And realistically, it goes down to the brain being the conscious and the subconscious, and having this master slave relationship between the two, right? When you think good things and you focus and you give yourself positive self-talk, for example, from a conscious perspective, it
Yeah.
trains and programs your subconscious, right? It's basically neuro-linguistic programming, right? What you say starts, you start becoming it, right? You live it, you breathe it, you become it, right? And you get that way through either talking to yourself positively or talking to yourself negatively. It's actually much easier to talk into yourself and programming yourself negatively, because it's much easier to do so, because it requires less energy, right? To do good things and to do positive thinking and programming of the subconscious mind, it takes energy and it takes effort. And most people, I think, don't would rather not put the energy in, right? Entropy is much easier to accomplish, right? Because you don't do anything; everything just degenerates, right?
Yeah.
So being able to have the focus and the energy to talk about good things, look at and focus on the good, because there's always good in everything, no matter how bad things are, right? I mean, this goes back to the book Extreme Ownership, written by Jocko Willink, right? I'm always a proponent of advocating for people to read this book, and I think it should be standard reading for everyone, really. He talks about, how it doesn't matter what happens. There's always good that comes out of this, and this is coming from a guy that's an ex-U.S. Navy SEAL who's been in the thick of action. He's had his life on the line. He's had men to lead. He's had men die under his leadership, in war in Iraq, for example. Um, and this and this type of mentality, really, you could never have a bad day when you have this type of mentality, right? Even when the worst thing that could possibly happen, there's always some good that comes out of it, whether you like to believe that or not,
Yeah.
right? So again, it's just a matter of how you see things,
Hmm.
right? I mean, you could never have a bad day if you just focus on the good that could come out of it, even if the worst things come at you,
Yeah.
right? And I think when it comes to the law of attraction, you can consciously attract good things and you can consciously attract bad things, right? It's how you look at it,
Yeah.
right?
It's so interesting that you mentioned that, because that is precisely what we do here specifically. This isn't geared in a spirituality. This is more about logic. Like, what is the logical outcome that's going to happen based on that narrative that we're using? And so for me, and I'll give a little bit of context. I have a belief system where we as human beings, we all come from this well-being bucket. I talk about it a lot from this perspective. And what that means is, my belief system is, every baby born is coming equipped already with their own well-being. So they have this guidance system of the positive, of what is the best outcome for me. So as we come into this experience, we're coming with kindness and joy and curiosity and flexibility and compassion and empathy, and so basically everything up here, that this is how we get here. And then we get here, and then depending on the environment that you're in, because I do believe there's a sense of nurture in nature, and depending on your environment that you come into this experience in, that sort of then shapes how we view the world. So if you're lucky enough to be born in a place that's pretty free where we are in Canada, versus a place like maybe like Syria, for example, we have a bit of a head start from there because we're not under bomb and threat and so on and so forth. So it just makes it easier for us to develop from this bucket as human beings. And so with that, for me, this becomes super important as we live this life experience because we notice when we don't feel good. We just do. Human beings notice when they're frustrated or angry or whatever because our behavior changes. We can feel it to our cores. And from my perspective, when we're talking about this, the reason why we feel it is because we've temporarily stepped away from that original state of being of well-being. Now, again, we certainly don't suggest that you can be in a war, for example, and go, this is fantastic. Like, that is not what we suggest, because for me, from this perspective, it would be unrealistic to ask people to look at the problem and enjoy it. That's weird for me. We're not wired as human beings to be able to look at the downfall, at the disgrace, at the shame, at the guilt. We're not wired to look at that and be okay with it. However, I do believe that when we do come across that problem or that negative impact that might be happening, that we have an ability to find a different perspective about the same subject. And it might mean that the simple perspective might be, I can't look at that anymore. Like, I physically can't pay attention to this
Yeah.
anymore, and I have to go do something else. And as you said, for me too, this is really heavily scientifically based. I am a certified life coach, but I've also spent a tremendous amount of time going to school and taking classes to be able to, number one, make sure that what we do here is about well-being and that we're not gearing people up to go, oh, she told me I was going to win the lottery if I did this, and that didn't happen. So for us, we're not here to have these conversations to get the outcome. For us, that is the byproduct. If you live from here, everything you want and wish and work for and dream for is meant to happen for you. But as you said, it's not going to just fall out of the sky. Like, there could be work for us to do. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Troy,
So
for everything that you've read and learned, how has it affected your life over the years?
well, I mean that's definitely pretty big pretty big question to answer in the scope of this webcast. But again, it really depends on how you're looking at life, right? I mean, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Stockdale paradox, but it relates to a military guy in the Vietnam War. He was captured as a POW, and he was a POW for many years, right? And the way that he actually survived was, it's very interesting as to how he actually reasoned this. He was perfectly fine dying today, but at the same time, he was looking forward to being reunited with his family. So he was living his life on a razor's edge, right? And I think when you take that type of mentality, and operate in life, you're fine, right? It gives you such a freedom to think like this, right? I mean, that's an extreme example,
Yeah.
right? And going back to your initial comments there about how everyone is basically born as a clean slate. Yes, that is definitely true. And your environment, you become essentially a product of your environment.
Yes.
And based on, I mean, there's a lot of other variables in there, genetic predisposition,
Sure.
how that particular person based on the genetic predisposition behaves in certain environments.
Yeah.
Because you can take, and then there has been a study or studies out there. I
Mhm.
remember reading a situation where you've got twins, right? Biological twins. One's brought up in a harsh environment, and one's brought up in a great environment, and they become two different people, right? But conversely, you could take somebody that's a certain genetic predisposition, put them in a really harsh, terrible childhood situation, and they could grow up to either be, a serial killer or, some productive member of society, and vice
100%.
versa, right? So it really depends. I mean, there's no rule there.
Right.
So, you know, going back to, the law of attraction here, I mean, if you want to switch it up a bit, I mean, the brain essentially will adapt,
Mhm.
right? If you choose to, right? A lot of times people, they don't, they feel like, I think they don't have a purpose in life. And I
Mhm.
think that really needs to be established
Mhm.
for people to, to live their lives, right? In a positive way.
Yep.
I think we can all relate to being, without focus, very, in very dark times in our
Yeah.
lives, and without focus, without purpose. Like, it goes back to, the movie The Matrix, right?
Love that
Agent
movie.
Smith, right? I mean, who are you without purpose, without, a
100%.
direction, right?
Yeah.
You're nothing, right? I mean, you're just a wandering soul, in the abyss,
Yeah.
right? You need some sort of touchstone, some sort of direction and strategy to move towards, whether it be focusing on your work, some hobby, helping others, right? And I've personally found that throughout life, helping others
Mhm.
has actually been much more fulfilling than acquiring any sort of wealth,
100%.
right? So, you know, it and when you do this, you help others. It's just almost mystical, right?
Mhm.
And that it puts you in this state where when you give, your time to help others. Like, I did a lot of mentorship and volunteering at NATE, for example, where I graduated from, and just helping these students, helping these people, just with things that I take for granted, right? I mean, most people have the curse of knowledge. They think that, everyone knows what they know, but it's not the case, right? Even the simplest thing, like, how do you meet someone? How do you, make eye contact? How do you shake a hand? Like, we all take this for granted, but for some people, it's just an eye-opening thing. Like, oh my God, like,
Right.
thank you for, yeah, I didn't even think of this, right?
Yep.
But just that feeling of giving back, it's really something special,
Yeah.
and
We
I think getting into that mode, it just starts, switching gears in your mind to goodness
Yeah.
rather than, depression or anything negative, right? You just feel, you know, this sense of freedom.
Yeah.
I don't know.
we
It's a nice feeling, right?
we talk about being unconditional a lot because part of our premise and certainly my belief system around this subject is when we do things like that, we really have to be unconditional in it. I also volunteer as well, but I don't do it for any other reason than it feels good. And it's exactly as you
Sure.
said, there's this internal thing that happens to us that it really is just because it feels good for an individual to be able to do something that benefits another without us needing anything in return. And I think that's where it becomes tricky for a lot of folks in this experience is they volunteer, but then maybe they go home and they resent that they took time out of their day and I did this and I did that and nobody's thanking me in the background and stuff. So it actually negates the volunteering. So it's part of what we talk about a lot is making sure that narrative and the intentions that we are setting before we take action really are from this well-being perspective. And we're never going to be able to live this life experience up here 100% of the time. I mean, relationships end, business partnerships go away, people we love and care about pass away, animals included. We're living a life experience where there's turmoil in the world, and depending on where you're focusing, like, we're just never going to be here 100% of the time. And if we make some conscious decisions to check in with ourselves and to understand what we want to get out of this life, and you mentioned purpose, which is such a wonderful thing, because from my perspective from this, our purpose as human beings is to grow and expand and take part and learn and educate and be friendly. And like, for me, that is the purpose of our human experience, which is so individual, but in this collective environment. And so I actually have a question for you as well. Where do you think your thoughts go?
Well, you mean literally?
Literally. Like, do you think as
Well,
a person has a thought, it's all in here and only stays in here? What, we can't see them.
well, correct. I mean, at the end of the day, humans and the human brain, I mean, it's essentially, at first principles, it's biological matter, it's chemicals, and it's electrical impulses, right? And the combination of these elements create the consciousness. It creates your
Mm,
everything functioning in your in
yeah,
your in your brain and your body, the control, your behavior, and that's the genesis of it, right? Is literally just those three things, right? I mean, oversimplifying it here, but right at the core level, that's what it is, right? The combination and the orchestration of these electrical impulses, the biological matter, the chemicals in here will produce something in the real world, right? The genesis of which
okay.
starts in the subconscious mind, right? It's programmed by the conscious. Subconscious mind will execute, right? So that's where it starts, right? And everything will start from that, right? So, realistically, if you're able to focus on good things, right? And the brain is a very, very complex piece of quote unquote machinery,
The
right? I mean,
most.
you take a look at how the brain filters reality, right? There's this reticular activation system that basically helps filter things that you want,
Yeah,
right? So if you're focusing on something,
yeah,
you'll have basically what's called enhanced awareness of it, right? And you'll see it's just like if you buy a car, say you buy a red car, for example, you'll start noticing red cars out there as a
exactly.
rudimentary example, right? But when you start focusing on the good things, your brain will just naturally filter out everything else,
Everything.
right? But it's just a matter of keeping the energy and your effort towards filtering. And eventually, when you get enough experience, you get enough, good things happen to you, it'll start going on autopilot after a while, right? It,
Hmm.
it'll take a lot of energy and effort at the beginning to do this,
Hmm.
right? And being, in good health definitely helps. When you have different vices, say drinking, you're on meds, you're smoking and, eating a poor diet, and high in seed oils and sugar, processed foods. It'll actually undermine your body's physiological ability to
100%.
to actually to actually engage in this thought, right? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts
Yeah,
that need to line up for you to get into a resourceful state,
so many.
right? Um, but anyone can do it,
Anyone can do
right?
it.
It just takes effort, right? I
That's
mean,
our message here.
right.
Yeah,
So, that's how you can manifest, from, biological matter, electrical impulses, and chemicals into the real world, right?
yeah,
That's where your thoughts start, and then that you can actually see them actioned in the real world, right?
100%.
We talk about it all the time that if you're noticing the bad, then you are absolutely below the line.
Yeah.
If you're
And it's
not noticing, then you're in the upper echelon and you are, having a good time, just going with the flow.
Yeah,
Correct. And it matters about your environment and what you're consuming, right? I mean, you start
absolutely.
taking a look at, I mean, it's very, very easy these days to focus on the negative because we're completely bombarded
So
through so
easy.
many different mediums, negativity, right? Through the news, through social media, through just things you're seeing in the world right now, right? I mean,
100%.
we're definitely not living in in epic times,
Right.
right? But you can either choose to focus in on that and succumb to the gravitas of this negativity,
Yep.
right? It's very easy to do.
Yep.
Or you can focus on finding your purpose and focusing on the positive aspects and what you can control and what you can do, right? I mean, life is short, right?
Yeah.
We can't just spend, and even myself, I've really stepped away from politics, over the years because you can go down that rabbit hole
Easy.
and it never ends, right? But what
Easy.
does it actually do? What sort of benefit is it actually providing you and for
Right.
those around you,
Right.
right? You create this negative aura, this negative environment, right? And it becomes like a gravity well
Yep.
that just, pulls people in and not in a good way, right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy to go towards entropy
Mm-hmm.
rather than to a higher energy state,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and it's interesting. So for me, where I think thoughts go is every thought, every word, everything that we can't see or hear goes into this bucket, which we all have access to. It's why it's one of my favorite questions because I go, well, how do you think a pyramid built 5,000 years ago in Egypt can be identical to a pyramid built in Mexico 4,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago? But we didn't even know they existed, so they weren't communicating. So for me, every thought, every idea, every inspiration is just out there for us to grab onto. And it's why I feel like you can say, "Oh, I thought of that," or "Oh, they have the same idea as me," or you could think of something and then all of a sudden see a new creator talking about that very thing because it is something we can't see. Consciousness is one of those things that, although is being studied on a scientific level, we still don't have a real true understanding of what that does, of what's happening. And I think our brains have something like 30 trillion neutrons, like they're just astronomical of what's happening within here. It is why I have this belief system that humans have more power than we give ourselves credit for. And
Yeah,
and
we
I
do.
and I
Yeah,
believe it's driven by this, that there's this well-being that's never gonna change. Well-being isn't all of a sudden gonna go, Troy, you're doing a bad job. Like you're so from my perspective, well-being is never going to waver from well-being. But it's also your well-being. I have a belief system that there's just nobody that can know what's better for you than you. And you know what that is based on how you feel. So it's why when we're coaching and asking people to really decide, and we've said this before, where, well, how do you wish to be perceived? Now, again, we want people to be able to perceive themselves first. However, the majority of people have a really difficult time doing that because they've never done it before. So it's often easier for people to go, well, I want to be perceived this way, and then we'll say, that's wonderful that you want to be perceived that way, but where are you here in order to get that perception? So we'll tell people, like, if you were writing your own obituary, what would it say? Because we don't generally do that in this experience, but it's a great way for people to truly recognize and acknowledge how they're living their life experience.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's why I think sometimes And when you notice, because I'll notice, you'll go to a grocery store, you'll be out shopping, and there's that person that's very negative, rude to everybody that they meet, and they really stand out. So on the one hand, you're noticing this really rude person, but on the other hand, it's hard to understand their life experience and how they potentially live that all the time.
We,
Well, again,
oh yeah,
like I said, it's easy to do.
yeah,
It's easy to do, right? I mean, people people that are negative all the time, it begs the question why, right? What is it? What is it? What are they? What has happened to them that's put them in this state, right? And usually
exactly.
people that are very negative like this and rude, I bet you at one point they were extremely sensitive, very soft and caring. They've had some very tough times in their life that have toughened up their armor,
Yeah,
right? And the more hardship and stress, and adversity that one has throughout their life, it thickens that armor,
yeah,
right? And it gets to the point where you just don't let anyone in,
yeah,
right? Especially love in your heart, right? And
yeah,
if you don't let love in your heart, you become in this complete negative state. Because if you actually had love in your heart, you wouldn't be in a negative state,
that's right.
right? Maybe that's the goal in life is to find that love in your heart, whether it be from someone else or for an animal or who knows what else, right? I mean, it comes in many different forms,
Yeah,
right? But having that love in your heart will basically ignite that fire in there, right? Because realistically, the state of being negative, it's a dark place. It's a
mm-hmm,
dark and cold place,
mm-hmm,
right? So, I mean, everyone's different, right? People can go through life with, adversity and hardships and turn out negative, but then there's other people who take this hardships and this stress and this trauma, and they can, reflect on it, understand it, and turn it into something good,
yeah,
right? But how do they do that, right? I mean, that's where the whole neurolinguistic programming comes into place, which we've been talking about
yeah,
here is positive self-talk,
yeah,
focusing on the good, compartmentalizing the bad, right? And
yeah.
people, I think, should really get good at doing that, right? I mean, you
Agreed.
can't. It's easy to just get focused on the feelings and let those feelings wash over you without tempering it with the logic that you need to
Exactly.
apply to it so that you can actually compartmentalize and rationalize exactly why you're feeling the way you
Exactly.
are. And that's a sign of real intelligence when you can actually question the line of thinking of how you're thinking, right? That's a huge executive level
Huge.
process that probably not many people actually stop and do because that
That's right.
takes effort. That takes, being in the situation and being situationally aware,
Yep.
not just reacting emotionally like a wild animal,
That's right.
but really just rationalizing your thinking. Why am I feeling like this right now?
Yep.
And actually, once you do that, you can really stop feeling a certain way and quickly start feeling another way by just
100%.
stopping and not reacting emotionally, because that's the path of least resistance,
That's right.
is reacting emotionally, you know, especially when it comes to, stressful situations, be it in personal life or at work,
Yep.
before reacting, right? Your brain goes through many different layers
Mm-hmm.
before it actually makes a decision, right?
Yep.
There's the reptilian brain, which handles all of your essential functions, keeping you alive, breathing, heart rate. It regulates and orchestrates a lot of different core processes. And then there's the dog brain, right? Which is sort of the tribal, packs, the affection, the camaraderie, building friendships, the jealousy, the greed, the lust,
Exactly.
and everything, right? And then there's the upper, executive functions, which makes humans humans, right? Where we
Exactly.
can actually think and reason and use logic to craft our behavior and action, right? And it's tapping into that, right, before you actually react, right?
It
And that's where you need to be.
Yeah, 100%. And we talk about things where we can't actually, at least from this perspective, that we can't stop doing something. Instead, we have to start doing something else. For us as humans, as soon as we say, you can't do that anymore, we automatically come in with this self-defense mechanism, and we haven't really been taught in history how to be able to differentiate, discover what those emotional states mean. And in part, I think because there is this sort of weird expectation that we could be looking at the shit show and feel good. Like that's just so flawed from
Yeah.
my perspective and from our
Yeah.
perspective and the way that we coach and the way that we try to educate about
Mm-hmm.
this. And
Yep.
somebody
Yep.
asked me the other day, a client, he's like, well, if you had your dream, like how would this be presented? And I said, from the second that baby is born. From the second that baby is born. And then as they
Yeah.
enter preschool and kindergarten and go through school, that this is actually a subject in school so that they can really learn and own their own behavior. Because one thing I've discovered from 8 years of coaching and my entire belief system, you said something earlier where you kept saying, why? That has been my question since I was probably 3 or 4 years old, to the point where people around me would be and say it. Number one, she's a little bit different. There's something about her. We don't really know what it is, but she's a little bit different. And she asks a lot of whys. I wanted to know why everything happened. And it was interesting when I went to school to become a certified coach, they actually said that I wasn't allowed to ask why. I had to ask what, because why was more accusatory versus, and I'm thinking, what? No. If you look up why in the dictionary, it says that it's curiosity and stuff. So, and we had this
Sure.
conversation last week where it's interesting also how a word to one person can mean something completely different to another. We talk a lot about when we're building relationships, and if you feel a little frustration, you can immediately go, okay, wait, what does that word mean to you? Because to me, it means this over here. But if their perspective of that word is why, for example, is accusatory, well, okay, then it makes sense to me that you went to the rabbit hole because of something as simple as a word. And it's why, and we talk about this a lot through our work environment, because I'm always like, well, what is the outcome we want? So let's figure out what the outcome is we want. And then from there, we get to ask that other question. Okay, well, is it in the best interest? Is it in the best interest of our people and our company and our customers and anybody who's going to, and myself, of course? And then does my intention and behavior match? And if you're saying no to any one of those, we're not ready to proceed yet. It doesn't mean we'll never proceed. It just means we might have to consider something else before we do it. And to just top on that a little bit, that narrative that we're saying to ourselves, and you mentioned it, like if we've had a really disruptive life experience, especially early childhood development, which we know in psychology is just getting a lot more interaction now than it ever has. If right from the get-go, we're using words inside of here that I'm not good enough, this is never going to work out, nobody loves me, I'm never going to be able to get anywhere. If we're using that language, it makes it really difficult to get out of bed. It makes it,
Right?
and I'll even use an
Because,
example that you and I, where you had coached me on a level from the development of this podcast. Because of my confusion, because of me not really knowing what I wanted it to look like, because of not really understanding what that dynamic was, it was really hard for me to move forward. Like it was just hard for me to take, and I'm going to say hard from a perspective that those were the excuses I was using not to take the step.
oh, well, yeah, you brought up a lot of good points there. I mean, when it comes to, you know, being overwhelmed, right? The way I like to look at things is from a first principles perspective. I break it down. What do you need? What do you need to do this, right? What are the absolute essential things that you need to be able to start a podcast, right? You need a microphone, a computer, like the basic things. And once you sort that out, once you sort out this, you can't eat an entire elephant in one shot. You got to eat it in
Right.
small pieces. When you break it down, it becomes less overwhelming and more. It brings up your confidence, so that you
100%.
can actually pursue this, right? But you brought up some interesting point initially, um, in your last comment about, talking about, I can and I can't, right? What's interesting about the brain is that it doesn't respond to an instruction set of I don't do this, but it responds better when you say do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a command,
Mm-hmm.
right? It works like a command. You need to invoke that command, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't really understand don't eat this,
exactly.
don't do that. You need to say, okay, you need to eat this. You're programming it, right? It doesn't understand
Exactly.
like the negation, right? That's a huge thing you can do to your and add to your repertoire now,
Mm-hmm.
and anyone listening to
Mm-hmm.
really improve the way that they're thinking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is think of it like a computer, right?
Exactly.
You need to tell it step by step on what it needs to do,
That's right.
right? Just like your conscious mind is the programmer, and your subconscious mind is the hardware that
Yep.
actually executes on the back end there, right?
Yeah.
So it might sound simple when I say it now, right? But, you know, acting and doing this is another thing,
It's
right?
practice too. I mean,
Sure.
it takes a desire of wanting to feel better. It takes practice of understanding where you are. It's why we were really excited to be able to create a visual so that people can just go, "Oh, yeah." I mean, in the simplest terms, I think this visual makes just such sense. If you're here, you're attracting this. If you're here, you're attracting that. And as we said a couple episodes ago, for us, it's weird that if you're here and expect this, that for me now is just it's odd, it's weird, and there's no wrongness. So again, we're not saying it's wrong to be here. You can certainly be here. It's just life is going to be a little sucky if you are. You're not going to have much fun, and we have one shot at this, at least in this physical body and this physical experience. For I think Canadians now, the average age is 82. So we have 82 years to explore and to live and to grow and be a part of this. Do you really want to do it from misery? And as you said, there is a physiological effect to the body when we are here. There just is. We increase cortisol levels, which does a whole bunch of other things within the system and our hormonal structure. It wires our brain differently. We become tired and exhausted. And in my world, law of attraction is just as accurate as well-being. Well-being's never wavering from being up on the upper end, and law of attraction's never wavering. It doesn't care where you grow up. It doesn't care how old you are and what your preferences are. It goes, where are
Yep.
you right now? How are you doing on this scale? Which then, if we're in an emotional state of disruption, from my perspective, again, law of attraction is then going, yeah, remember that time 10 years ago that this happened and you behaved really badly and you did this? And then we'll be like, oh my God, yeah, I can't believe I did that. So before we know it, we're self-sabotaging, we're in guilt, we're in shame, and then wondering why our world is happening around us. So we go out into the world and we're hitting every red light. We're stubbing our toe, we're cutting ourselves shaving, and then that contributes. And for me again, the physical experience happens after everything else. It happens after the emotion, the thought, the desire, the inspiration that goes on within us turns into an emotion. That emotion then, as we take action, contributes to this physical experience. And for me, it doesn't happen in any other order. The physical doesn't happen first, and then we have an emotion. No, the emotion happens, the thoughts happen, that narrative happens, then the physical happens. And
Hmm.
for me, whatever the predominant vibration is what it is going after. We've had this conversation about sporting events and stuff. Like, why is it if you go to a hockey game and you're down 3, the score is tied 2-2, and everybody all of a sudden is a little bit on edge? It's because of the predominant thing happening. just like business meetings. If you're in a room of 10 or 15 people and there's a couple of downers in the room, they're going to stand out like a sore thumb.
It's like we talked about, for listeners to start maybe with baby steps, simple things like eliminating the word can't maybe from your vocabulary, but definitely having 5 things that when you're feeling below the line, those 5 things that you can go to that give you the feeling of gratitude and of being blessed or being lucky. The simple things like me being able to wake up every morning.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that's like huge. It's my first gratitude in the morning, right?
Yeah.
Like just being able to wake up is one of my 5 that will help get me on the ladder
Yeah.
back above the line. Baby
I
steps.
agree. I think people don't. I think people take a lot of things they have granted, right? Even you may think that you're in a really terrible place, but if in context, there's people that are in way worse
Way
situations than you.
worse.
But if you take a step back and really look at what you've got, it takes a bit of practice to do it.
Yeah,
but once you do it, you realize, like, you know what, the things are not that bad. What the hell am I thinking here?
Yeah.
But again, it takes that energy. It takes energy, and when it comes to energy, I mean, you need to be healthy, right? I think the biggest advice that I could give is first take care of your physical body. First of all, right? Make sure that to put yourself into a resourceful state, right, where you feel like you're actually accomplishing something. You're healthy, and to put your mind in a positive state, you need to take care of yourself, right? You need to train. You need to go to the gym. You need to do some resistance training, because this has real physiological effects
100%.
on the human body, right? I mean, you take a look at the release of these endorphins, the serotonin, the dopamine that comes from training, and not only that, you're actually working towards something. You feel better.
100%.
I mean, humans we're not meant to sit around in front of a computer and be docile. That's just not how we've evolved.
That's right.
We were designed, and we've evolved basically to be roaming around, hunting, surviving, looking for food, and surviving the world. I mean, we're the ultimate survivalists of this planet, right?
Yeah.
We were designed to survive on this planet,
Yeah.
right? And we wouldn't have been here. We wouldn't have gotten to where we
There's
are
no way.
if we couldn't do that, right? And it comes back to being physical, eating proper whole foods, staying away from, like I said before, processed foods, drugs, alcohol, just cigarettes, vaping. It does nothing but undermine you, right? And I know you're shaking your head there, Kathy.
But I do vape. Yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another thing. Yep. But keeping your physiological body, your physical body in as best shape as you can, because realistically, the human body, it's a ticking time bomb, right? Just as you age, right, and depending on your genetic predisposition, it can be lengthy or short. Your systems, the complex orchestration of systems, they just start failing. Little things here, little things there, And
your cholesterol goes up.
Well, that's I don't know. I think when it comes to the cholesterol, I think that's another
That's
another
a whole other
offshoot.
episode. That's a whole other
But
episode.
there's no this whole idea of good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. It's not
silly.
it's
Yeah, so good. So I have a question about something you said, because you said you have to take care of your physical body first. And again, for me, the physical body is after the fact. So if we're meant to take care of the physical body first, what has to go on in here for us to even take some of those steps? So we have to have a belief system, one, that yes, this life is about being active and mobile and getting out there and exercising, because again, it would be an unrealistic expectation to have a lean, fit body if we're couch potatoes.
But you're right. You're right. It has to start mentally, right?
Yeah.
And I guess to some people, it may take them to hit rock bottom before they get that, right? And then they have that moment of clarity.
Yes.
Where you think to yourself, what the hell what am I doing? What am I
Mm-hmm.
doing with my life? What the hell's going on? Like,
Yep.
like literally, I think your brain has this almost like this safety system, where it says, you know what, we got to turn things around here, right? Because, it wants to survive, right? Your
Yes.
brain wants to preserve your body. It wants to
Yes.
survive, right? And if it gets to the point where it literally will tell you and it'll motivate you to make change, to elicit
100%.
change, right?
So
And then that's where it starts, right? And then you can go and train if you don't know how to train.
you can
There's no
learn.
excuse these days, right? There's YouTube, there's AI that you could create programs. There's literally when somebody
No
says, "Oh, I
excuse.
don't know how to do anything," you know what? There's zero excuse
Yeah.
these days, right? I mean,
Zero.
there's absolutely none to be able to learn whatever you want on the fly, right? And just do it, just execute,
Just
right?
execute.
One of Michelle's favorite phrases is take away their excuses. Take away the excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, why do you got to think about it? Why are people making excuses, right? It's
Ooh.
because, right? Do you want to comment on that?
I would say people make excuses because they're here. So a person who is frustrated will absolutely come up with a reason, either why you're wrong, this won't work, they don't know what I'm talking about. And same thing when we're in fear or blame or any of these negative emotions. We use those emotions as our reason not to be here, not to change our perspective, not to do it. And I think for humans as well, it's difficult when we're here to be able to see it. It's that thing of, and I've done this with the police department, for example. It's why when police go to somebody's home that's in distress and they tell people to calm down when they're here, does that make it better or worse?
So what do
100%
you
of the time,
say?
it's worse.
So what do you say then?
So from my
Instead of calm down, what are some strategies
right away,
instead of
I
saying?
would say something like, I can see that this is a difficult situation. I can tell that there's something bigger happening here. I can tell you might need a conversation or to be able to step away. Anything that is more from here than saying to somebody deep in the rabbit hole or even a little bit in the rabbit hole, and it doesn't even need to be in a police type of environment, but in relationships, in coworker relationships, everybody needs to calm down. You automatically are getting everybody to stay here a little bit longer. And because our human reaction is we can't be told what not to do and feel good. We can't be in those two places at precisely the same time. It's why we'll say, people are like, no, I'm in two places at once. And I say, from this perspective, that's impossible. You might be doing this real fast. I'm excited, I'm nervous. I'm excited, I'm nervous. But you're never doing it at exactly the same time. So when we practice those words and finding things, setting intentions before we get out of bed in the morning. We've said this before. There is no human that wakes up in a bad mood. We wake up, we start having conscious thought, and then before we know it, that we can recognize, and then before we know it, it's I can't believe I have to get this off my plate today, and I've got this going on, and nobody understands, and I've got these meetings next week, and before we know it, a minute has gone by, and we have absolutely created the next moment, the next moment, and the next moment. Whereas when we open our eyes in the morning and we make it our intention to tell ourselves that today is going to be a day about learning and expansion and growth, and I'm going to be the best I can be, and I'm going to give it my all. And one of my other favorite sayings is helpful over hurtful. I'm going to be helpful today, and I'm going to see where I can build and do this and do that. Then when we get out of bed, that next moment is going to match. It's the next moment. It's the next moment. And from this perspective and the way we try to coach and educate in it is where I am right now is creating the next moment.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I guess it goes back to the old make sure you can set some goals. And now it sounds trite, but it really works. Setting goals, having something to look forward to,
Yeah.
makes a huge difference versus getting up with having no goals, being disorganized, it creates a state of chaos,
Absolutely.
right? And then it puts you in a state of chaos
Absolutely.
mentally. So setting goals, yeah, even just something is just some sort of daily affirmation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all remember the old Saturday Night Live, the daily, Jack Handy,
Oh,
I'm good enough, I'm smart
Yeah,
enough,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
gosh darn it,
Yes.
people like me. Hey, maybe he was onto something, right? So again, it goes to neurolinguistic programming, right? Your brain, what you will act is how you program yourself.
Yeah.
And even if you make, self-deprecating comments, guess what? Your subconscious mind, it doesn't know the difference, right?
That's right.
So people got to be very careful on what you say, right? I mean, your brain, your subconscious mind, it just doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
a lot of people don't realize that.
it's why we talk about so much creating the narrative around the desired outcome, consciously creating a narrative around the outcome that you want. Because if we're not using words, thoughts, and humans, we can't manage our thoughts. Humans, we have over 70,000 thoughts a day. There's no way a human can manage every thought that's going on within them. We can manage our emotional state. That's the connection between what's happening in here and how we feel, and then the outcome that happens. So when we take some time, as Kathy mentioned, as you mentioned, writing down those things. I mean, I created an entire whiteboard of my intention. I intend to be kind. I intend to be helpful. I intend to grow. I intend to learn. I intend to be curious. Like a canvas size list of intentions, and I signed it, because it's one thing to create the intention, but now we have to become it. We don't get to say, I intend to be helpful, and then in the background doing everything we can to sabotage something. We don't get to
Sure.
live on those two spectrums and then be happy and live a fulfilling life experience.
Sure.
Troy,
Yeah.
we have had so much information from you today. We would love to have you join us back on
100%.
the podcast at some point, for sure. You have been a fantastic guest today, and we thank you so much. If you have any closing thoughts, Troy, that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think, thank you very much. And I'd be happy to come back on the
Amazing.
podcast again. I think, the closing remarks here is that if you think it, right, you become it.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's the sort of overarching, thing here that we can take away here. And it's not easy to do, right?
It is
Having
not
that
easy.
energy, to actually think positively and not focus on the negative. It's hard to do, right? But it is doable.
Yeah.
Right. It's your choice, right? At every moment in our life, we sit at a fork in the road.
Yeah.
Do I take the easy path of least resistance and be negative, or the other path, right? Which one is more fulfilling? Which one
100%.
leads to better things in your life, right?
Yeah.
Action is the engine, right? I mean, through your thoughts and your beliefs, action needs to take place for you to actually realize any of this, right? You
100%.
could be the best, you could try to be the most positive person in the world, but if you actually don't take any action,
That's right.
it's nothing, right? So you need to act. Even the simplest things, like even getting up, and I think it was Jocko Willink, from the Extreme Ownership book I mentioned earlier, I alluded to. He said even just getting up and doing the simplest thing as fixing your bed puts your mind in a state of actually executing and producing something of value.
Accomplishment.
The smallest thing. I mean, who would think, okay, you fix a bed, how's that going to make a difference? But it does to your
Yes.
subconscious mind, right? Doing that little bit of effort when no one's looking,
Yes.
right? No one's going to really criticize you if you don't make your bed, but when you do, right? It just starts the engine. It starts that engine
Yeah.
of being in a productive state that can actually cascade throughout your day, in your personal and your professional life, right?
100%.
So yeah, I mean, the brain's a complex thing. You need to understand it. It understands everything about you.
Yes.
So you need to understand it. And when you do understand it, then you can bend it to your will.
Yes. Agreed.
Right.
Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate it. I truly had no idea that it was going to be such a wonderful conversation. So I never know the subject that we're really going to talk about when we do these. So thank you so much for entertaining us with
You're
your
welcome.
thoughts and some of your belief systems around it too. Thank you very much for being here
Yeah,
today.
you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on your program.
Kathy, how about you?
Definitely gonna look up that book
Yeah.
and see what I can find. Forward to that. If any of our listeners have any questions or comments, please like and subscribe below. Until next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Troy.
Thank you,
Ciao.
Troy.
Thanks,
Thank
Michelle.
you, Kathy.
Thank you.